Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Dormakaba, or Stanley. We know it as Stanley. This is their part number QCL150E626S4 478SSCKA. So that's a long part number for this lock set. Stanley has been manufacturing or providing commercial builders hardware for several years now. Relatively new, but has experienced. I see it. I see the material all over the place. I don't bump into seeing it specified on projects as you would other companies that have been manufacturing door hardware, lock sets, closers, exit devices for several decades, and not just the hinge component really alone. So this video will be a visual review, an overview of the components in the box. We're going to go over the product catalog, a couple of things to watch out for when you order this material, and let's start with a visual review of the lock. Certainly a grade 1 lock, large and substantial. As far as grade 1 locks go, it is certainly an attractive cost. This is certainly this is an imported item. This features a clutch function, which we'll get to when we dissect the part number. It's going to include a couple of original keys. The rows for the inside portion. That appears to be stainless steel. And then, of course, the latch bolt. UL labeled. That F stamp, you're looking for that. If you're a fire door inspector, you're looking for the UL label there. Their listing number is also there, that R number. Okay. The installation instructions, we're going to go over the template as well. We're going to go over which are included in the box, as well as the 4 7/8 strike. That's intended for a hollow metal frame. Okay, so let's take a look at the document itself, the product catalog, so that we can understand this lock and its functions. Okay, what I'd like to start with is the product cut sheet that's down below this video. And it's helpful because it does give you a very simple overview of the lock itself. It's a grade 1 heavy-duty cylindrical lock, and we'll just stop there. Important to know that it is rated grade 1 under ANSI BHMA. It's handicap compliant. It's certainly fire rated and positive pressure compliant as well. Title 19 compliant, hurricane compliant. That's very important. When you are doing doors here in southern Florida, every component must, like a fire door, every component must be installed to meet that requirement. Exposed trim, pressure cast zinc, plated to match, finish designation. Will work on doors from 1 3/8 to 2 inch. That's a nice range, there's no doubt. 2 3/4 and 2 3/8 are standard back sets, and you can do a 5 inch, and I believe they'll do that with a link, an extension link. ANSI strike is standard, and you can do others. T-strike certainly. I don't know if a full lip is available. 2 1/8 inch door prep. This would take a modified 161 prep, which means, and when we get to the template, it's a 161 prep, which is a 2 1/8 inch hole, that 2 3/4 back set with a 2 1/4 by 1 1/8 by 5/32 of an inch edge preparation. But the MOD, or the modified, comes in when you have to prep the through bolt holes for the lock chassis, which we'll get to. We just discussed 1 1/8 by 2 1/4. Okay. Now, keying. You can do regular 6-pin conventional cylinders. You can do 6 or 7-pin small format interchangeable core. 2 keys per lock, of course, when you're doing a conventional core. and the factory can do any sort of key work for you that's necessary, including construction keying. Keyways include Kwikset, Weiser, Schlage, Yale, Sargent, no cylinder, and then you can do Best keyways. Apparently they will give you an F keyway from Best if you want them to provide the cylinder. Now, this is the important thing to note about the Stanley system. I'm not aware of anyone else who does it this way, but when we watch the function numbers, okay, a 130 is a passage, a 140 is a privacy, a 150 is an entry office, a 151 is an entry office, a 154 is a corridor, a 155 is a corridor. If you were following along, you see that the actual function number changes when you go to small format interchangeable core. I ordered a 150 and then specified small format because I just assumed that they were like everyone else in terms of the part number, the function number actually not changing. Well, it does, so be mindful that if you want small format, you have to use the part number directly associated with it. So they'll obviously give you the entrance, corridor, classroom, storeroom. Then they can give you the E, L, and the EU, electrically locked and electrically unlocked, and conventional and small format cores. 605, polished brass. 613, oil rubbed. 619, satin nickel. 625, polished chrome. 626, satin chrome. Lifetime mechanical finish, 3-year warranty on all finishes except 613, which will carry no warranty whatsoever. Okay, so that's the product catalog, and that's a handy document to literally start with. Let's jump to there is a link to the full line product catalog as well below this video. As well as the product brochure, which will just be an extension on the cut sheet, basically. And the reason that that's important is because it will give you the legend by which to order the material. In true Dorma fashion, they dissect every portion of the part number to help you make sure you get the format of what you want correct. And had I originally followed this, I would not have gotten a 150 when I really needed a 151. I intended to order a small format, as I had said earlier. Okay. This is where they get into the different designs. The lock that we have here is an E-lock, which is the Sierra lever, Summit, and Slate. Let's take a look at those. Different design. Of course, the Sierra is the classic return back to the face of the door gizmo, with the Summit being the large curved, and then the Slate being the straight style. Okay, the 3 common lever designs that you're going to find. If you are doing a fire-rated door, be sure to order the proper fire-rated latch. That matters. That matters because we need to be able to ensure that, of course, all of the components will carry the same requirements. Other latch options are here. The 2 strike options, there is only the 4 7/8 strike, and then the 2 1/4 strike, which would be called a full lip strike. Your keyways are here. The lock that we have here is a Schlage C keyway. The keying can be done at the factory here as well. Then any sort of additional options that are required is where you'll bring them in here at the very end of this catalog section. Let's continue on with the full product catalog. Now, as we continue on through the product catalog, we get to the point where we exhaust all of the information. It is all simple and straightforward from Stanley, and the material is indeed relatively commonplace. Dimensions for the levers, as you can see here, are important to know, and naturally they are handicap compliant. Okay, let's also now take a look at the template that's here. and that is where your 161 prep comes in, or modified, I should say. You can do 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. They mention they can do a 5-inch. Obviously, you know, you'll make the adjustment necessary. A 2 1/8 inch hole with your through bolts at 12 6, and then your edge preparation. And the edge preparation will also be dependent on the latch bolt that you're using. They're not all 1 1/8 wide. I believe they will certainly have a radiused corner as well as a 1 inch wide. Now, the problem with the template that they give you here is that either the template is not to scale, or you're going to get, or you're going to have a mistake. And here's what I mean. They want you to fold the template over at this line, and then you will draw back to your vertical line at 2 3/4 or 2 3/8. And from your vertical height to the center of your preparation will be at that intersection of your vertical and horizontal, your height line and your backset line. That's where you're going to put your 2 1/8 inch hole. The problem is you have to be mindful because backset, and that's what we're talking about, 2 3/8, 2 3/4, or 5-inch, that's defined as the dimension from the edge of the door. Let's say that this is just your 2 1/8 inch hole through your door. This is just your 2 1/8 inch hole. Okay, 2 1/8. From here, the edge of the door, to the center of the hole is your backset. The problem with that is backset is actually defined as the center of the thickness of the door. It's no problem when you have a door that is, of course, 90 degrees square. But if you have a door that features a beveled edge, and you put that template on this side or on this side, you're missing the mark because it's defined from here to the center of that hole. That dimension, the amount of this bevel is not concerned with the thickness of the door. The distance from this point to this point is defined as 1/8 of an inch in 2. So for every 2 inches, this will be 1/8 of an inch. So if you have an 1 3/4 thick door, it's going to be obviously just ever so slightly less than 1 1/8 of an inch. So be mindful to accurately understand where you're prepping that hole before you go prepping it. Prepping a hole like this would be super easy. Some people like, you know, if you've ordered the doors from the factory, they're going to send them to you already prepped. If you're ordering the doors slab and you're going to do it yourself, a lot of people like lock installation kits. I simply opt for the less expensive alternative, which would be a bimetal hole saw, a 1-inch fly bit, a template that I can clamp to the edge of the door and use my router to do the edge preparation. I would have a plastic template for doing the holes at 12 6, make it super simple, fast, and easy. Now they do show in the template as well your radiused corner, and that's going to be a 1/4 inch radius. So when you're prepping this, be sure to simply use a 1/2 inch diameter router bit when you're prepping that, and then don't square the corners out, and it will be exactly the way that you require that it be. So let's now move. We've done the template, we've done the product catalog and the cut sheet and the sell sheet. Let's move to the installation instructions, and we're going to do that with the lock in our hand. So let's proceed with that. Now in this part of the video, we're going to move on and talk about the installation instructions. And naturally they are included with the paperwork. There's a link down below this video to both of the documents, the template, and then of course the installation instructions. So in the upper left-hand corner, let's look at a definition of the terms used in the lock. So when the lock arrives, it is going to be basically loosely assembled. The inner rose is separate. Okay, it's going to look just like this. Interior lever, working from the upper left-hand corner. Then you have your interior rose. Catch tool, we're gonna use that in a moment. That's in your screw package. Your interior rose is what they call this portion. That's important. It has your lever return spring assembly in it. Okay. One thing I don't know is if these parts are available as standalone items. I will investigate that and update the extended description. It would sure be nice to buy. I don't believe you're going to be able to buy replacement lever return springs. It doesn't appear to be. Doesn't appear to be serviceable at all. But I'll update that and see if we can buy this as a standalone product. Mounting plate, that's going to be here as well. Okay. Then at that point, you have your latch, 2 3/8, 2 3/4, 5 inch. You have to specify that. That is a 2 3/4 latch. That's here, listed and labeled. Important to note about the latch: if you're doing a fire door, the latch projection is 1/2 inch. Be mindful to review your label on your door. It's probably going to say minimum latch throw 1/2 inch. It could say something other than that, like 3/4 inch. So be mindful to review that and be sure of what latch throw you need. This one's 1/2 inch. As we continue to move through the lock, you get to the lock body itself, and at this point we need to remove the outside lever that will allow us to look at the lock body, the chassis, the exterior rose assembly, the adjusting plate that is inside of here, along with the cylinder and the exterior lever. Now, you know, in a video like this, I wouldn't normally take that apart. There's no reason not to. The reason we're going to, however, and it's unlikely that you will need to, but in the upper right-hand corner, it is showing us Figure A, which details how to change the door, change the lock set to account for the door thickness. If you have an 1 3/4 thick door, you don't need to do any of this. If you don't, here's how you're going to do it. There are 3 columns of instructions in 3 different languages. English installation instructions, step 1, to prepare product, to determine your door thickness by referring to Figure A. Depress the pin on the turn button and slide pin into the appropriate notch. So what they're referring to is literally here, the plunger mechanism here. That is a spring-loaded pin there. It's set in the middle location, which is for 1 3/4 thick doors. And just make your adjustments as necessary based on the thickness of the door. We're set at 1 3/4. We've demonstrated how to change it. Just push that in and you'll be able to move that. However, the chassis on the inside needs to be adjusted as well. Okay, there's no way to know what this is set to. If you didn't know what it was set to, you wouldn't know. The instructions tells us it's already set to 1 3/4, but let's just take it apart, because it will also allow us to demonstrate Figure B, Figure C on the left side, how the lever comes off. It's important to know the way that the key rotates in order to retract the latch. Okay, this is an office function. What are we doing here? This is a 150. Okay, so yeah, this is this is an office function, and what that means is it will act as a passage set when it's unlocked naturally. If you push that button in and you just push it, actually, this might be an entrance function. Forgive me, I've forgotten. Stand by. So this is a 150 function, and that they're calling that entrance office. And the 150 function in that link to the product catalog that's down below that will allow you to see the description of the function. Let's go over that right now. So the way in which to adjust the exterior side is, because you don't, if you're taking it out of the box, it's set to 1 3/4. If you needed to change it, or you weren't sure, I suppose, what it was set to, forgive me, we're talking about the function. This is an entrance office function, and what that means is it's really a triple function, meaning it can act as an entrance. Well, it can act as a storeroom, it can act as an office function, and it can act as a passage. Here's what I mean. And it's all based on what you do to the plunger on the inside. So right now, the plunger is projected out. I push that, I'm going to pop the latch, and it just turns it back into a passage. So this will always operate. Either side is going to retract the latch bolt at all times. If all I do, that's function 1. And that's a passage. If all I do is push the button in, and I leave it, the outside is locked. It has a clutch function on it. It's not retracting the latch. But if two things were to happen, actually, if one thing were to happen, when I rotate the inside trim, oh, I can't do that because my housing's not on, but if I rotate the inside lever, it will pop the plunger back out, and now I'm unlocked again. If I push, and that's your office function. Office function means it's, you enter the office, you close the door behind you, you push the button, now the outside's locked until you exit and leave, then it's unlocked again. But this is a triple function. If I were to push and turn, now it's always locked from the outside. I can always exit, but I always need the key to come in. That would be like a storeroom function. So those are the functions on this lock. Take that off. So knowing the direction that the key turns to unlock or to retract the latch is important when it comes to locks, because that's a tip-off or a telltale sign telling you, oh, this is how I remove the trim. Counterclockwise is almost always the case, but not every single time. There are actually locksmithing tools called plug spinners. If you needed to move a plug in the opposite direction, if you've shimmed it to the wrong orientation, or picked it, I should say. So a clockwise rotation of 90 degree. That's going to permit me to take that tool that they have, which, pin tool, did they call it? Catch tool, to depress that small end inside of there into that hole, and as I push that, you might tell it goes in a little bit. Well, that's depressing the spring that's inside of there. So the question that people have is, when the key's in the regular position, or if it's removed, if I took it all the way out, I can no longer depress that. So the only way that you can get this off from the outside when the door is locked is to have a key, or obviously destroy the lock. 90-degree clockwise turn, or as far as it goes. It almost goes 90. That will allow me to depress that pin, or that tab, to pull the trim off. Okay? Now, since we're here, why does it work that way? I put the key back into its normal orientation. You'll notice that the tailpiece is horizontal. Okay? Tailpieces on lever locks are generally vertical because the cylinder stands this way. But when you tip the lever on its side, now it's horizontal. Okay. The tailpiece is this way. That's the important part. It's not this way. When you look down inside of that lock, you can see that there's a funny shaped receiver. It looks like a weird number 8. Well, that's meant to receive that tailpiece this way. Okay? This is the mechanism that the tab is attached to. That black item in there that's moving as I push my finger on it. So that's that C-clip. When my tailpiece is here and I depress the tab, it can't move in. But when I rotate the key 90-degree clockwise, now that unit has enough freedom, enough space to actually move, allowing me to pull the lever off. That's how that works. You need the key, because you can't get that tab in far enough to get it cleared inside of the machining preparation of the trim to pull it off. There's no way to pull that off. The only way to get it off is to, again, destroy the lock. Now, we don't need to take the cylinder out of the lever trim because the installation instructions tells us... well, actually, we do. We need to take this off. This is the exterior side. What they want us to do is to insert the catch tool through that hole, and based on how far it moves over, that's what thickness the door is set for. It's hard to see that, but you can now. It's set to 1 3/4. Okay, and that's exactly how they do that. Should you need to adjust it, you're going to rotate this plate. That's all you're going to do. Rotate it to where you've got it set to the proper depth. Now I'm going to be sure that we're set back to the right depth so that this client's not wondering why his lock doesn't work. Yeah, right on. Okay, I stopped it right where it needed to be. Yeah, right at 1 3/4, right where it should be. Okay. We'll put that housing back on, or they call it the rose assembly. Bear with me. Here we go. It's one nice thing about locks. You know, you can take them apart, you can study them, you can see how they work. It's just really handy that you can really learn about locks and how they, you know, they end up functioning. It's quite fascinating how they actually work. Okay, so we've got that put back together the way she belongs. Now we have the exterior. Now, this part of the video is really going to talk about if you were going to rekey this. You would do everything we just did. Take your key out, and at this point, just push the cylinder out. This piece here is mandatory to have. Don't lose it. Don't decide, oh, I don't need that. That's called the retainer. That has to go back in there. And that's what your cylinder looks like. This is a typical, this is a composite type of construction, generic type of construction. Cylindrical knobs, cylindrical levers, even deadbolts will have cylinders that will look like this. Schlage C keyway. You can position that tailpiece horizontally as well, which would be for a knob lock, but it's shown vertically because that's how we hold the cylinder, because again, your lever isn't like this, it's like this. So it's like this. This is how that goes. So the tailpiece is horizontal. When you insert it in the lock, if you were to rekey this and put the tailpiece back on the other way, you would be able to push the lever on, turn the key, push it all the way in, but then the key won't go back to horizontal, and you'll say, gosh, my lock doesn't work. So turn it as far as you can, depress the tab, pull it off, reposition that tailpiece back to the proper orientation, and then you'll have proper lock function. So if you were going to rekey the cylinder, that would be how you would go about doing it. Or if you ordered it less cylinder, you would insert your cylinder. We're going to put that back in there and put the lock back together. Our retainer, and it's nice to have the installation instructions when you're doing it, because at some point every lock is a new type of installation for us. There we go. We've got that retainer drop back in there. And that retainer is meant to really just hold the cylinder in place. When I keep my finger on the retainer, I can't pull the cylinder out. But if I were to remove my finger, I could pull that whole thing out. And it keeps the cylinder in place. Because if you didn't install that, as soon as you put the key in, the cylinder is going to go underneath the head of the lever. And then you won't be able to get the key pushed all the way in, because the feature of the key will prevent it from going in far enough to really operate that. It might in this case because you've got lots of room, but most key blanks don't have that much room before the bow of the key starts. It would end up looking like that. Okay, so we'll just put that back together. When I do that, I just leave the key in its normal fashion, and I literally will just move that down as far as I can, then I'll rotate that 90 degree, and then I can generally push on the lever or the knob and hear the click. You want to take that key out. This is very important. Pull on that. Make sure it's seated correctly. I did a lock job one time for a client on a Friday. Just went to their home, rekeyed all the locks. Took about an hour and a half. Lots of doors. Large house. It's all finished. Client's super happy. It's Friday afternoon. The house is rekeyed. They're moving in. They just bought the house. And I get about an hour away, which is only in Chicago traffic, maybe 6 miles. Client calls and says, yeah, the knob is, I went to open the door and the knob came off in my hand. And I realized what I did. It was the last lock. I'm like, which door is that? I wanted to make sure it was one of my doors that I worked on. Well, it was. I failed to tug on that to make sure it was seated properly. Turn around, boom, bam, click, tugged on it. Thank you, sorry. And there you go. I could have walked the client through that, but that's not what the client paid for. The client paid for the job to be done correctly. Turned around, went back, fixed it, installed it correctly, and then we were done. So that explains how to set the thickness. That explains how to remove the cylinder should you need to. And at this point in the video, let's continue to move on with the rest of the installation instructions. Now, continuing through, we've talked about the adjustment, removing the cylinder, moving forward. In column 1, the step 1D we did, step 1E we've done, except to state, if you are rekeying the lock, or if you're introducing a new cylinder into the lock, no matter what you do, you've got to use the tailpiece that comes on this lock with your lock. It has a particular shape. There's a small little bump in it. That's required for the lock to work correctly. So you'll need to, if you're putting in a new cylinder, and maybe you have a keyway, you're going to need to reuse that tailpiece, is the bottom line. Note, regardless of cylinder ordered, you must use the tailpiece supplied with this product. Reinsert the retainer. Figure C, reassembling. 1G. We've gone over the entire 1 section. Section 2 is to install the latch. Now we've prepped the door for the hardware already. Okay. You're just going to make sure that this fits nice and clean with your chisel, clean out any work, or if it's a hollow metal door, you might need to knock loose some overspray of paint and get that attached. The latch bolt has to go in first, and that's because you need to slide the chassis onto the latch. So the latch has to go in first because that needs to slide together like that. Without the latch in, you don't get this to work. Now, some lock sets, now it's locked. I've just pushed the button in, and now I'm locked. I'm not retracting the latch. Now, some lock sets operate, and this doesn't, and I wish it did. It's a grade 1 lock. In my opinion, it should. When you push that button in, it would be nice when you depress that latch that it would release itself. The concept is you have a lock like this on a bathroom. Somebody is in the bathroom, opens the door, depresses the button, and then pulls the door closed. Now it's locked. This does not have a feature on it that will allow that to pop back open, unfortunately. It really should, though. So be mindful. It doesn't operate that way. Sometimes people expect them to operate that way. Sometimes they don't want them to operate that way. Know that this lock does not. It would be nice if that would automatically unlock itself, because it should, in my opinion. Every time you pull the door closed, if you're not in the room, it should be unlocked. It's an office function. But every time you're in the room, you can just... Oh, we are locked. Okay. You should just be able to unlock that. Anyway, so that's the latch. Install exterior assembly into the exterior side, step 3 of the door. Inserting stem posts into the 2 small vertical holes and making sure the prongs of lock body engage tail of latch. Prongs of the lock body and tail of latch. They must be referring to making sure that this connection is solid. There are some prongs here, though. There's one here, and there's one here. If you ever see a hollow metal door, it will have a 2 1/8 inch hole and then a couple little half circles at 9 and 3. That's where that prong goes, those 2 little prongs. If you have a wood door, they'll just bite into the face of the door, and that helps for anti-rotation. It's typical on knobs, levers, whatever it is. Step 4 is to install that mounting plate, and here it is. That mounting plate with those 2 posts are going to go to the chassis, into the chassis, and then you'll run your screws through here, and they'll go to the tapped holes on these posts. Now, why are there the holes at 12 and 6, or wherever they are based on the manufacturer? Most companies put them at 12 and 6, but not everyone does. And the template isn't the same on all of them. It's because you can really exert a tremendous amount of rotational force on that. And they simply found early on with lever locks in the early 1990s when ADA was passed, that all the stress was here, was the chassis pulling the latch, and it would become disjointed and eventually break and fail. So these posts were added to keep that chassis firmly fixed inside of the door. So that's why you have a modified prep to the 161 MOD. After you've got the interior mounting plate, you're now going to get into your screw package. That's here. And like all well-engineered locks, and I believe that this one is, there are literally 6 screws. Literally. There's 2 for the latch, there's 2 for the strike. Then the only other 2 you need are the 2 for the lock body. And they're going to go right through here, and they're going to thread into those posts. You'll tighten that down. Don't use a screw gun. Use your hand when you're attaching that. If you over-tighten them, the lock just won't work correctly. It might retract, but it may not come back to its natural state. After that, I have gone too fast. After that, you need to, before you put the screws in, you'll put your interior rosette, then the 2 screws, then your rows, and that will just simply press on, is what it will do. Yeah, I don't see any feature to this lock that tells us there's any particular way that this goes on. A couple little dimples that are there. I would probably line it up with one of those notches that are here and then just pressure fit it on. Making sure arrow on rose is positioned towards the door edge. Okay, arrow on the rose. Well, arrow on the rose is towards the door edge, there's no doubt. Rose cover, install interior rose, making sure small hole on neck of lever aligns over catch on interior rose. See figure H. Yeah, okay. This just pressure fits on is all it does. And then when you bring your lever finally, you're going to make sure, because this will be depressed down far enough so that you can actually see the tab that's there. That will be depressed down far enough so that the tab will fit into that groove that's there for that hole, and that just pushes straight in and on. In page 2, they talk about the hardware that you need to prep it. Page 2 is all about the mortising, which we've briefly gone over. They're showing that simple hole saw, and that's the way I do it as well. Very simple and straightforward. I can tell you that 2 3/4 center to center on the modified holes at 12 and 6. That's common. 5/16 diameter drill bit is common. We can sell you the template, the plastic template that can be used for that. Stanley Dormakaba produces those. And at that point, there's nothing else on the installation instructions for us to cover. It is a nice lock in the sense that it is easy to install, in spite of the fact that I made one step too quickly. It's an imported lock. That will probably be the downside of getting available parts, which I will determine if those are available. Along with the fire latch that we talked about well early on. I don't know the projection of that fire latch, so I will update the profile of this. I want to know if it's 3/4 inch. And the only negative, if I was going to search for a negative, would be the fact that to adjust for the door thickness, you have to take that outside lever off, which makes sense because you need to balance the chassis within the thickness of the door, so you need to adjust accordingly. But you really only need to adjust the exterior. Relieve that plate, it'll go further into the door, you'll modify your button position, and you're good to go. 1 3/8 to 2 inch is a really great range of door thickness. I've had clients have trouble with 1 7/8 and their lock, and it's nice to have a little more breathing room. And what I mean by that is, if you ordered a 14 gauge steel stiffened door, that's not an 1 3/4 thick door. That's going to be 1 7/8 for sure. And this lock is made to handle that. Not all locks will handle beyond 1 7/8 out of the box. Obviously, it won't do 2 1/4, and Stanley doesn't have one for a 2 1/4 inch thick door, and I doubt that they can order one for you. But the fact of the matter is, out of the box, it's a great range, simple to install, looks nice. I believe this was the Sierra lever. Certainly a heavy lock, there's no doubt about that. The name Stanley has been in the building industry since the mid-19th century. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Stanley QCL150 lock, and remember to pick out that function based on your cylinder type and your function, or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.